There's a moment that happens in silence. A child stands at the edge of a group, waiting to be noticed. Their heart beats faster. Their hands fidget. And in that stretched out second, something inside them quietly breaks. If you've ever watched your child come home quieter than usual, retreating to their room without explanation, you may have witnessed the aftermath of that moment. But here's what most parents don't realize. What happens in that silence doesn't stay there. It follows them. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how deep that invisible wound goes and why catching it early might change everything. Let me tell you about Sarah. She's 12, bright, curious, loves reading, but every Monday morning she complains of stomach aches. Her parents think it's anxiety about tests. It's not. It's about the lunch table where her former friends now sit without saving her a seat. They didn't fight. There was no dramatic falling out. She simply faded from view. And here's the unsettling part. Her parents have no idea. Because Sarah has learned to hide it. She's learned that being excluded feels like a personal failure, something shameful to conceal. Now, you might be thinking this is just typical adolescent drama. But neuroscience reveals something that should make every parent and educator pause. The brain processes social rejection in the exact same regions that process physical pain. When Sarah watches her friends laugh without her, her anterior cingulate cortex lights up identically to how it would if she'd been physically hurt. This isn't metaphor, it's biology. It explains why children who experience chronic exclusion don't just feel sad. They feel wounded at a level deeper than words can express. But there's something even more concerning that happens next. Something that can shape the trajectory of an entire life. Why does exclusion hurt so much in the first place? The answer lies in our evolutionary history. For thousands of years, belonging to a group meant survival. A human alone was vulnerable to predators, starvation, exposure. So our nervous systems developed a powerful alarm. Exclusion equals danger. Even though modern children aren't facing literal predators, their brains haven't caught up. When a teenager is left out of group chats or a child is picked last for teams, their nervous system activates a primal threat response. Cortisol floods their bloodstream. Their brain becomes hypervigilant, scanning for signs of further rejection. And this is where the real damage begins. Because the brain, especially the developing brain, is a pattern recognition machine. When exclusion happens repeatedly, neural pathways form. The child begins to predict rejection before it occurs. They start editing themselves. A 7-year-old who raised their hand enthusiastically in September now sits silent in December. A 15-year-old who once shared ideas freely now stays quiet in group projects. They're not being difficult or shy. They're protecting themselves from a pain their body has learned to anticipate. But here's what makes this even more complex. Think about Marcus, age 9. He's on the autism spectrum, struggles with social cues. On the playground, other kids instinctively form groups. Marcus approaches, doesn't read the subtle signals that this game is closed, and gets told to go away. He doesn't understand why. He internalizes it differently than a neurotypical child might. Where some children think they're being mean, Marcus thinks I'm broken. This distinction matters enormously, because when exclusion becomes identity, when a child shifts from I was left out to I am the kind of person who gets left out, that belief crystallizes into self-concept, and self-concept drives every future choice. Let me show you. Emma is now 26, successful marketing executive, but in meetings, she still hesitates before speaking. She writes emails, then deletes them. She turns down leadership opportunities. Her colleagues see competence. She feels like an imposter. What they don't know is that Emma spent middle school eating lunch in the bathroom, because she had nowhere to sit. That was 15 years ago. But the neural pathways formed then, the belief that she doesn't quite belong, still fire. This is the hidden cost of childhood exclusion. It doesn't just affect childhood, it programs the internal voice that narrates adulthood. Exclusion doesn't only harm the excluded, it shapes the excluders too. Picture a classroom. A teacher asks for group project partners. 3 girls immediately link arms. Jamie, sitting nearby, makes hopeful eye contact. The girls glance at each other, a silent communication, then move away. This takes 3 seconds. The teacher doesn't notice, but multiple psychological processes just occurred. Those 3 girls reinforced their in-group bond through exclusion. They learned that belonging can be strengthened by defining who's out. Jamie learned she's out, and the 30 other students witnessing this, they learned that exclusion is normal, acceptable, invisible to adults. This single moment just shaped the social architecture of that classroom, and unless someone interrupts this pattern, it will repeat. Daily. Forming the social ecosystem where some children thrive and others survive. Studies tracking excluded children over decades reveal elevated rates of anxiety disorders, depression, difficulty forming trusting relationships, and even physical health problems in adulthood. Chronic loneliness activates inflammatory responses. It weakens immune function. This means that playground exclusion isn't just an emotional issue. It's a health issue with consequences that echo for years. But before you feel overwhelmed, here's what you need to know about intervention. The brain is not fixed. Neural pathways can be rewired. A 15-year-old who's internalized exclusion can learn new patterns. But it requires specific approaches, and this is where parents and educators have more power than they realize. Let me give you 3 scenarios that change outcomes. First, recognition. 10-year-old David sits alone at recess. His teacher notices not just once, but as a pattern. Instead of forcing David into groups, which often backfires, she creates a playground helper role, organizing equipment, helping younger kids. This gives David purpose-driven interaction, building social confidence without the pressure of breaking into established groups. 3 months later, David has friends. The intervention wasn't dramatic. It was strategic recognition. Second, reframing. 15-year-old Jade tells her mother she wasn't invited to a party. Her mother's instinct is to say they're just mean girls. But here's what matters more: helping Jade separate experience from identity. You weren't invited to this party is different from you're the kind of person who doesn't get invited. This distinction prevents the wound from becoming identity. Jade's mother asks, "What do you want to do this weekend instead?" Shifting focus from what was lost to what can be chosen. This teaches agency. Third, systemic change. A middle school implements rotating lunch tables once weekly. Students can't sit with their usual groups. Initially, there's resistance, but over months, something shifts. The rigid social hierarchy softens. Students discover unexpected connections. The chronically excluded find moments of inclusion. The habitually excluders develop empathy. One structural change interrupts dozens of individual patterns. Now, here's what this means for you. If you're a parent, watch for the signs that go beyond words. A child who suddenly wants to stay home, who becomes intensely focused on appearance or belongings, trying to fix what they think makes them excludable, who stops mentioning friends' names. These silences speak volumes, and your response matters more than you know. Not forcing solutions, but offering presence. Validating the pain without amplifying the fear. If you're an educator, understand that exclusion often happens in the spaces between your attention. But you can reshape those spaces. Assign partnerships that rotate, structured activities that prevent clique formation. Most importantly, modeling inclusion yourself. The students you notice, the voices you amplify, the moments you validate, these teach more than any curriculum. If you're a mental health professional, recognize that many adults struggles with belonging, with speaking up, with self-worth. Trace back to these early patterns. Helping clients see exclusion as a wound rather than evidence of unworthiness can unlock profound healing. The excluded child exists in every school, every generation, but exclusion doesn't have to be their permanent story. With recognition, intervention, and systemic change, those neural pathways can rewire. That internal voice can soften, and the child standing at the edge of the group can learn something that changes everything. That belonging isn't about fitting into circles drawn by others. It's about recognizing your own inherent worth, regardless of who sees it. That's not just psychology. That's hope with evidence behind it. If this video helped you understand the psychology of exclusion in children and how social rejection shapes child psychology, share it with parents and educators who need to see this. The effects of social exclusion on kids are profound, but recognition changes everything. Comment below your experiences helping excluded children in school. Your insights matter. For more on how exclusion affects child's mental health and practical intervention strategies, subscribe and turn on notifications. Together, we can rewrite the story for children standing alone. Thanks for watching.